With conservative law firm, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, about its new survey on how to engage populist conservatives. So what were some of the biggest takeaways that you found from this report?
Yeah, so I think the number one takeaway is that sort of similar to the general population right now, economic struggles are preeminent. If you want to reach out to people, if you want to help them to sort of think about your policy issues or things you want them to care about, then you better sort of acknowledge the economic hardships that people are going through. We know people are struggling with prices right now, with the cost of goods. And if you don't sort of acknowledge those things at the forefront, they're going to sort of tune you out when you move on to other topics.
Have Wisconsin Republicans been doing that messaging?
You know, it obviously varies, right? There's some folks that are, starting in that way and making those acknowledgments. There are other times where that may not be happening to the extent that we, at least from this polling, we think would be preferable. But we definitely think it is the approach that ought to be used.
What would you like to see from this report be implemented in this election?
Yeah, so I think that there are a number of different things in this report that could be useful. I think one, we were curious about the extent to which these voters were sort of actually free market oriented. Are these folks still interested in traditional free market principles we might associate with someone like President Reagan? And I think that we see to some extent that is the case. There is some support for things like price controls that you generally wouldn't associate with conservatives, with Republicans. But there are ways to sort of move folks off those positions and explain, more government intervention actually is not likely to lower prices, and then you can sort of move on to again promoting those more free market aligned principles.
Does this research suggest that voters care less about ideology and more about practical results?
I think that's an excellent point. I think that's sort of exactly what we see here. Folks aren't necessarily concerned with the ideological consistency between the different positions that they take. So, for instance, they may support something like tariffs at the national level while also saying they're an advocate for free market. So I think people aren't, they're concerned about kitchen table issues. They're not necessarily concerned to any large extent about making sure their positions are ideologically consistent.
Has this been a gradual change with this kind of more view of practical solutions, or is this something we've seen before for conservative voters?
I think, you talk to a political operative, right? They'll tell you again, this isn't necessarily entirely new, but I think the sort of phenomenon that began in the conservative movement that sort of Trump was able to sort of bottle and bring to the forefront in terms of elections. I think the power of that group in the conservative movement is relatively new. Some people say Trump sort of just captured it. Some people say he brought it about. But the reality is this group is a important subset of the conservative movement now, and we have to sort of recognize that when we think about how to create policy positions.
Will it be important to reach these voters too come the midterms?
Absolutely. I think that what we've seen a lot of times from the sort of populist subset of the GOP is that these folks don't necessarily turn out if Trump isn't on the ballot. They turn out in the general elections, in the presidential years, but not in other years. So speaking to these voters absolutely is key for any candidate that wants to be victorious.
That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for